Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I'm going to be speaking about meditation, astral travel, and journeying along with a few related topics. Now for me, these three practices are very similar. I know that may not be the case for some others in their practice. You may be watching this and thinking that those three things I just mentioned are all completely separate and very disparate from each other, and that is completely fine. For me, they are very close in relation and at times overlap, and in some circumstances are very much the same thing for me. So I'm going to be speaking about them in that way from my own perspective, sharing my experiences and thoughts. And so if you maybe have never tried any of these or are very new to any of them, hopefully this can offer some inspiration or some insight. I do have some tips and tricks that I find work for me specifically. I don't profess or claim to be a professional in any of these fields. I am just somebody who does these things for themselves, who has read a few books. And so if you care to learn from whatever I have to share, that's great. I also am very much looking to learn from others. So if you have thoughts, feedback, your own findings and experiences, definitely leave them down below. I love to hear experiential knowledge that is different from my own. I'm always fascinated. So let me know what you all think in the comments below, or if you want to make a response video, feel free. Love to see those. So I have some materials that I'm going to bring out as I speak to certain things. For me, meditation, astral travel, and journeying are similar. Now, I have read and in some ways do practice in or through the lens of Celtic shamanism. So I have a bunch of books on that, and the idea of journeying that I take from that sort of lens or perspective does factor into my practice. There was a time where I was conducting meditation that felt very guided or astral in some ways, and this was before I really knew much about those sorts of things. So I'll start by giving you all a bit of my history. Really, when I started practicing magic or having a sort of spiritual practice of any sort in a consistent way, I was going through a really tough time, and for some reason the type of practice that appealed to me the most, rather than spellcrafting or doing sorts of workings like that, I felt very called to go somewhere else, to project myself somewhere else. And so I read up a bit on meditation and meditation practices, as well as astral travel that just happened to be suggested along with it. And so those are the first two things I dabbled in. And I wound up filling this journal completely with my experiences. So a big tip for anybody looking to have these sorts of meditative experiences, astral traveling type experiences and journeying, I think you should all have a notebook if you want to have a record of what happened. I think it's very easy to forget, though it's almost like a dream. When you wake up, it's going to get hazy and fuzzy, and there's a very good chance you're not going to remember much, if not any of it, down the line. And so I was very, very regimented in recording whatever I saw, experienced, did in those sorts of states. And so I highly recommend having a journal, really sticking to it and trying to use it. Now, for some who use meditation as a way to clear their mind, or for breath work, which I know is very popular and a little bit more traditional, I'm not speaking to that meditation so much. I'm speaking more to a guided meditation or a more imaginative form of meditation. So keep that in mind. Now, I filled up this journal. Journal for me is key. I think a big thing for many looking to get into this, and something that I struggled with the most at the beginning, was actually getting to that place and also believing what I was doing and thinking it was real, or real to me, that it was something outside of myself or something. That's a tough one. Some people do like the idea of believing that it is a part of themselves, that they're working with archetypes, that they're working maybe with a collective unconscious or their own subconscious, or maybe just working in those sorts of, I think it's theta states. And then there are others who do think that and do believe that they are tapping into something outside of themselves, that they're maybe guides of a sort, deities, spirits, that they are truly in a state or projecting themselves into a state that is not within themselves, that is outside of themselves. I don't necessarily believe one or the other. I'm not there's a part of me that almost doesn't care which it is, but that if it works, I'm very much geared toward the result of it and the effect that it has on me, more so than why or how or exactly what it is. So I can see both sides. There's a part of me that hopes that it's something outside of myself, because it, in a way, it means that there's something greater to believe in, but I don't think there's any less to believe in necessarily if I were to find or believe that it is happening within myself. To see your own inner landscape as being that expansive is also a beautiful thing as well. So there are multiple ways to view the idea of astral travel, journeying, and that sort of meditation. So journaling is big, and then maybe deciding where you kind of stand. I don't think that's something that's very necessary exactly. So that might be something you come to over time. But getting into that sort of state, I think, is somewhat difficult. It takes practice of relaxation, of clearing one's mind. The whole point of it, in some ways, is that there's a lot going on. So it can be very visual, it can be very auditory and sensorial in some ways, but it's a little bit of a contradiction or a funny sort of catch that to get to that point, many times one has to relax to a degree where almost nothing is distracting you. You aren't thinking about anything else. I find that I need to get my mind to this place of almost the closest that any of us can get to nothingness, of thinking about nothing, of having nothing in my head, and that takes a long time. It can be it's easy to get hard on yourself and to be frustrated, and there are days when it won't work, and there may be many weeks, it may take weeks before you find yourself able to get to this state. For me, many times it doesn't just happen very quickly either. It can take 10, 15, 20, I mean 10 would be maybe on the lesser side, but yeah, it can take more than 20 minutes for me to even start getting into this astral journeying type space. And it does require a lot of quiet, it requires me being comfortable, and so I think determination and really deciding that it's something you want to invest in is important. And you have to have maybe a good reason for why you'd like to do it, otherwise you're more likely to fall off the wagon. If you're just doing it out of curiosity or excitement, there's a good chance that you won't power through and push yourself to get through the more frustrating and difficult parts that mostly happen at the beginning, where it's hard to get to that state of almost projecting yourself or journeying in some way. I know that the idea of listening to something that's rhythmic or drums, a beat of some sort, some go for that. There are times when I do and there are times when I don't. Sometimes I'll listen to nature noises as well, and those can be kind of rhythmic in a way. I think being comfortable is key, and so if sitting down on the floor and just sitting upright is not comfortable for you, if that is distracting or painful in some way, I'd say lay down. I usually am laying down whenever I am meditating or astral projecting or journeying in any way. I find it a lot more comfortable. When I'm just sitting normally, I do sometimes get like back discomfort or pain, and I find that I'm focusing more on my posture and the sensation that my back is giving me than I am about clearing my head. So rather than listening to any sort of stringent instruction in how you ought to position yourself posture-wise, I think lay down if you need to do something like that, sit in a chair maybe. So as far as the materials and practices you might want to engage in, I'm a big one for using sound I know many use sound like drums or rhythms to get to that sort of state and to maintain that state when they're in it, because it's constant. It's something that brings them in, and it can almost muffle out any outside sounds or sensory experiences so they don't detract from or draw somebody out of the state that they're in, that they've gotten themselves into. I also like to start my sort of meditations, traveling, journeying with a sound that signifies that I equate to the beginning, the start of, and I think it does affect my mind and my body. It's almost like Pavlov's dogs, when they hear the bell, they know that the treat is coming. You train yourself to associate a certain sound with that experience and that practice. And so I might ring these chimes like in some way, and then my body sort of starts to relax, and over time it becomes a routine. You become accustomed to that sound, and so it makes it easier for you to get into that state more quickly, to associate and move yourself a little bit more with more focus, in a more decisive way, where it's a choice rather than something that has to be almost stumbled upon. So I will ring the bell when I start, but I also ring the bell when I end. And I think that that's important once I come out of it, to ring the bell to tell myself that it has ended, that the window of the sound that I'm almost creating a compartment that I enter to do this. I ring the sort of chime and then I enter, and I ring it when I leave, and that creates this very, almost like these parameters, these time and auditory parameters that make it very finite. It helps me to not feel like what I've done is carrying over, that I can walk away from it. And that's important too. It can be a disorienting experience. It can be something that has bleed over into your daily life, and I think to give it its own space and time in a very finite way can be important for some of us. So that is something I definitely recommend. A sound, maybe of a chime, or just something you can like strike that has a very distinctive sound at the start and end of a astral travel, astral projection, journeying type experience. For me, that's important. Likewise, I'm a big one for palm stones and crystals in these experiences. I know not everybody is, but I usually will go for ones that fit firmly in my hand, and I almost imbue them with or value them in certain ways for certain qualities, and I will pick the stones accordingly. So clear quartz for me is an all-purpose like amplifier. So if I'm just looking to take my natural state and feel like I can focus it and hone it and ramp it up a bit, I might go for clear quartz. I pulled out also labradorite. For me, this is a very magical stone. So if you go into an astral state or a journeying of a sort, and you are looking to conduct magic while you're there, doing something that is going to affect change of some sort, for me, I would then use labradorite, because for me, I connect that to magic or personal power. If you're looking for something, if you're looking to get in touch with your heart, your sense of compassion and love, you might turn to raw emerald, rose quartz, things that you associate with that. If you're looking for more of a spiritual experience where you're connecting with guides or archetypes or spirits outside of yourself, you might go for amethyst or selenite if you're looking to go to those higher vibrational states, whatever you'd like to call them. So for me, whether or not the palm stones and crystals actually hold those associations and correspondences physically themselves in an objective way, in a intrinsic way, is something I'm not so sure of. But I do know that I do believe I choose to imbue the intention into these items, and so by holding them, it does affect me in some way, and maybe it would do the same even if I didn't believe it, but who knows. So that's something that I personally recommend if you're looking for more of a specific experience, a focused experience. Using items that you connect with certain qualities and correspondences can be really beneficial, because when you go into these journeying and astral states, in these mind states where you are visually seeing things, experiencing things that are not of necessarily the consensus reality, and you're looking to get something out of that experience, having something that can hone the focus, that can direct the experience a little bit, is highly beneficial, because it's easy to get out of hand. It's easy for these things to get away from us in some way. So little reinforcing things like palm stones or touchstones of some sort I find to be very beneficial. I also will generally light a candle, and I view the candle as something to ground myself or attach myself to. I don't know where I read this exactly, but I think I've seen it in a few sources where the idea of using the candle to draw oneself back when you're ready to return to your body is highly beneficial, and I do enjoy it. I will put the candle somewhere in my line of sight so that I know when I'm slowly coming out of this state that I can visualize the flame of the candle, and that when I open my eyes, it will be in my line of sight. And so it creates this it creates a sort of continuity, a smooth transition where a rough and rocky one might otherwise be in place. It makes it easier to move in between these states. And so I would recommend something like a candle, or maybe a visual marker that you can start to use to move in and out very smoothly of these states, because yeah, it can be a bit jarring at times. It can be difficult. And so, yes, highly recommend something like a candle. I also, of course, recommend giving yourself the time and space to do this. If it's if you're in a loud environment, if you're in a place with a lot of people, if you don't have the time and you know that you're trying to rush to get through this, it's likely that you're not going to get as much from it. When I do these things, I will either pick the very early morning or the very late evening. It's easy to kind of fall asleep. You can fall asleep when you put yourself in these states instead of actually astral projecting or journeying. And so I recommend maybe picking one time when you know you're going to be a little bit more awake. So if you're extra tired that night, maybe it's not the right time. If you woke up and you really just didn't get enough sleep and you think you'll fall back asleep trying to do this, it might not be the best idea. So keep that in mind. I would wake myself up very early before work or school and just give myself a half an hour at least to do this, and that felt fine. I didn't feel rushed. If I had maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, and I was very good about the journaling. Likewise, the way I like to use the journal was also for dreams, and I found that when I was actively engaging in astral projecting, journeying, for various sorts, I would do this to learn about myself, to heal myself, to believe in something, to feel like I had more value than just my physical body and what I could offer with it. That's why I was turning to these sorts of things. I wasn't content with my physical reality and myself. And so I was looking for something that was intrinsic, deeper, constant in terms of my value and myself. So that's just a little bit of background about why I turned to it. You might turn to it to heal yourself, to learn more about yourself, to reflect, to help to overcome or understand certain things better, to seek answers for things in your life or for others. But I would use this journal also for dream work. And so I found that when I was actively engaging in this astral projection of a sort or journeying, that my dreams would actually correspond and link very seamlessly with those experiences. So on a handful of occasions even, I would wake up, I would write my dream, and the same day that I would go to journey or astral project, the dream would kind of start up again. I would find myself very consciously in the same dreamscape, and it would all be very vivid, and I would be interacting. So a dream might be cut short, and then it gets picked up where it left off with me in it, and making active choices and actually understanding the themes and elements and symbolism of what was going on a lot better. This didn't happen all the time, and it took a while before that started to happen for me, but it did sort of give me, I started to feel like my dreams held more value and weight, and that there was a lot more meaning, that I needed to analyze them, and that there was something to them. And so the dreams I got started to get a bit more abstract and strange, but they felt much more meaningful. They felt like they needed proper attention, and so this became both a dream journal and a journeying or astral projection sort of record. And so that's just a personal recommendation. I'm not sure if that's something that others do or that's recommended in a lot of books, but I recommend it for anybody out there who is watching. Now, after a while, and when you start to research these things, you may hear of different techniques that work for others, some that are a bit more advanced or meant to heighten the state for one reason or another. One that I see around quite a bit and that I also interact with and have some experience to share on is flying ointment. Now, I've spoken about this a tiny bit on my channel here and there, but not to a great extent. And I know there are many out there that use flying ointments and know about them, but there are also many who don't quite understand them or aren't sure about them. And I know at first I was a bit intimidated and I just didn't really know what to make of them, so I'll share my experiences. Now, flying ointment is a sort of balm, or of course it's an ointment in a way. Usually they're very oily. They are of an herbal nature. They're very natural. You can buy them from some metaphysical stores. I got this one on Etsy. It's one that I've purchased a few times. I've tried out a few. But yes, they're herbal sort of ointments that are quite usually pungent. They use and utilize herbs that are meant to assist in dream work and altered states, things like mugwort and vervain, and I'm trying to think of the others, I'm drawing a blank, but yeah, they utilize those sorts of herbs, and it's meant to be something that you put on certain points in your body that soaks in and hopefully enhances dream work, astral projection, meditation, journeying, things of that sort, or magic and altered states. And so I would recommend looking into that and deciding if that's something you want to interact with or try out. I guess I'll offer a little bit of a warning. I know that in going way back, the origins of flying ointments included more psychedelics, things in them that were psychedelic or psychotropic in nature that would actually alter one's consciousness or state of mind. And that, of course, in modern times that is illegal. So any that you're going to buy in a metaphysical store or on Etsy they aren't going to have those sorts of ingredients. I do find that just these herbal ones are quite potent and can have a greater effect than I kind of anticipated. So use them with caution and care, and just know yourself. And I think maybe get confident and really get into a routine with your practice doing this and feel confident in your abilities to journey and astral project before trying. I remember the first time I tried this in a sort of astral projection or a journey of a sort. It did unnerve me a bit. The senses, like the visual and auditory type things, did feel a bit heightened, and I wouldn't say I was scared or that anything frightening or dangerous happened, but it was unnerving, and I did kind of have to bring myself out of it very quickly. It caught me off guard, and the type of experience that I was having was different, and it felt like I'd gone a little bit further past where I was comfortable, past my comfort zone for that time. And so I took a break from the flying ointment at that point, and then slowly eased my way into it, having in mind what the effects could potentially be. So just for some people, I know it probably won't have as big of an effect, or depending on what type you use, but yeah, just be a little bit careful with those sorts of things, or any sort of substance or tool that is meant to heighten a state. I do recommend starting with the basics and just feeling comfortable with what you can do with just your own organic body before maybe implementing tools and substances that are going to heighten or strengthen the state or experience for you. So that's that. And then I guess finally, speaking to the various traditions and sources that you can draw upon, I know that many cultures, many spiritual paths draw from basically what equates to, in my mind, the same concept of journeying and astral projecting and what that may mean. I think that, again, having a reason that you'd like to do this for more than just curiosity is important. Otherwise, you might find yourself without any sort of direction, or it's easy to fall out of it. And I think that doing it in a routine, doing it every day, or having a schedule that you really stick to, whether or not you can get yourself into that state or not, is important. There are plenty of days where I just laid down for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes and never got there, knew I probably wasn't going to get there, but felt called to just be there and see if it would happen. Maybe I was too distracted, too tense, too anxious. I couldn't clear my head that day. I could hear a little bit of a distracting noise. Whatever the case might be, I think it still helps to get you there. And it may take a few days or weeks before you even touch upon anything that feels like a projection or a journey of some sort. So I recommend just being consistent and keeping with it. And I'd be very curious to know others' experiences. In some ways, I would be open to sharing some of my own experiences. I actually forget quite a few of them, and sometimes I'll go back and read them, and it feels like I'm reading a book or the experience of somebody else. And then as I read it, I start to realize what effect it had on me long term, and as I kind of went forward learning lessons in this place, and the individuals I would very frequently interact with and contact and work with in this place. And there was something about it to me that felt very powerful, it felt very potent, and it felt very necessary for me at the time. And while my practice now with this sort of thing is not as consistent, I also think that it was something of a necessity for me at this time, whereas in where I'm at now, it doesn't feel as much like a necessity, and that's probably why I don't turn to it as often. So I'd be curious to know, but yeah, definitely some consistency, and I'd be open to maybe sharing a few experiences from this. If anybody's curious, let me know. I'd probably pick the less personal ones that just illustrate how it went for me or how it works for me, because I know it's going to work different for every single person as far as the experience you have and what that entails. So I'd be curious to know. Share a little bit down below how it may work for you. Of course, don't feel compelled to share anything too personal or that you don't want to. But I hope that this was helpful, or at least interesting. Maybe it gave you some inspiration to undertake some of this type of practice for yourself, or for something that you might want to incorporate into this sort of practice if you have something that is equivalent to this in some way. So if you liked this, found it fun and entertaining, subscribe and like. I hope you are all well, and until next time, bye.